In January of 1924, amid one of the coldest winters in recent memory, Vladimir Lenin, the leader of the Bolsheviks and founder of the Soviet Union, suffered a fatal stroke. His reign had witnessed some of the most brutal, terrifying moments in Russian history. The famine of 1921 to 1922, the Civil War, and the Red Terror. But the Lenin years were also a time of great experimentation, utopian fervor, and, in some cases, genuine liberation. Old rules regulating marriage, family structure, contraception, abortion, and sexuality were overturned. Homosexuality was decriminalized, and the Soviet state promised to provide robust social support for working women and their families. Mass literacy campaigns were launched, and, by most accounts, were reasonably successful. Diverse artistic movements flourished, as artists reckoned with what a truly proletarian form of expression would look like. This was the era of Chagall, Rodchenko, Lysenko, and Malevich. Art reflected the effusive hope of the revolution. This uncontrollable revolutionary energy is described magnificently in Boris Pasternak's gorgeous 1957 novel, Dr. Zhivago. "Just think what extraordinary things are happening all around us," Yuri said. "Such things only happen once in an eternity. Freedom has dropped on us out of the sky." The light of the revolution was dwindling, though. The utopian impulse of the Lenin years would carry over to Stalin's infamously brutal regime, particularly in the realm of science. Scientists were urged to reconsider what was possible, often to the point of indulging in dangerous fantasy. The most infamous of these scientists was the fanatical botanist Trofim Lysenko, who consigned millions of Soviet citizens to starvation through his bunk agricultural theories. Lysenko's sordid story will, I hope, serve as a powerful reminder of the dangers of unchallenged pseudoscience, especially in the hands of a maniacal despot. Trofim Lysenko was born in Kharkivka, present-day Ukraine, in 1898. His family were peasants who lived in punishing poverty. Lysenko was drawn to the lofty promises of communism, in no small part due to the suffering and deprivation of his early years. He dreamed of revolution, and in 1917 his dreams materialized. He was won over by the Bolsheviks' unwavering commitment to turning society on its head, to, in Lenin's words, looting the looters. As a youth, Lysenko went to work at the Kiev Agricultural Institute. His experiments at the Agricultural Institute prompted him to contemplate the possibility of transforming winter wheat into spring wheat, a process he would come to term vernalization. The end goal of vernalization was to improve harvest by making the crops in question more productive and resilient through exposure to cold conditions. Lysenko believed that the laws of biology could be amenable to communist ideology. Marxism emphasized the role of environmental and material forces in shaping history and human behavior, and Lysenko reverse-engineered this thinking into his theories of biology. Lysenko posited that under the right conditions, plants could adapt to almost any environment, so you could, in theory, grow a healthy banana tree in the middle of Siberia if its seeds were exposed to frigid temperatures. Lysenko's conclusions were also influenced by the work of Ivan Mishurin, a Russian horticulturalist who advocated for the Lamarckian idea of evolution by acquired characteristics. The idea is an intuitive, though dubious one. Organisms respond to the changing conditions of the environment over the course of their lives, acquiring beneficial traits that they bequeath to their young. The French scientist Jean-Baptiste Lamarck used giraffes as his example. It goes something like this. Giraffes stretch their necks to get food. The continuous act of stretching the neck increases its overall length, and this elongated neck is, through a mechanism he was unable to isolate and describe, passed on to the giraffe's offspring. Our contemporary understanding of genetics by and large contradicts Lamarck, although epigenetics, the study of how lifestyle affects genes, has prompted some scientists to reappraise Lamarck's work. Lysenko's big breakthrough came when he was only 29 years old. At the time, he was working in a remote state agricultural experiment station in Gyanza, Azerbaijan. On August 7, 1927, Pravda, the official newspaper of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, reported that Lysenko had discovered a way of fertilizing fields without fertilizer, and that he had managed to demonstrate that winter peas could grow in the warm climate of Azerbaijan. Lysenko's work was presaged by the German scientist Gustav Gessner, who undertook similar experiments in 1918, albeit to less fanfare. In 1928, Lysenko went public with its first paper on vernalization, which further attracted the attention of Soviet leadership, who had recently begun the process of collectivizing the whole of the country's agriculture. Every farm in the Soviet Union was to be handed over to the state, where they would be converted to kolkhozes, collective farms managed by members of the collective itself, and sovkhozes, which would be managed by the state. The fate of the Soviet Union depended on collectivization. Under Lenin's moderate, new economic policy, a measure of free trade and market activity was permitted. This led to the Soviet Union becoming economically splintered, with the vast countryside and its peasantry subsisting under capitalist relations, while the cities developed under industrial socialism. Stalin believed that such social contradictions would undermine the revolution and corrode the authority of the ruling Communist Party. His dogmatic, narrow interpretation of Marx and Lenin made it impossible for him to accept the existence of parallel economic systems. Capitalism had to be destroyed, once and for all. Collectivization was cataclysmic. Millions starved in Ukraine and Kazakhstan. Lysenko used the horrors of collectivization to his advantage, promising to help the Soviet state avoid such calamities in the future. For his obedience, Lysenko was promoted to the Ukrainian Academy of Sciences, an impressive feat for someone still in the early stages of his career. As the years passed, Lysenko's megalomania continued to get worse. He was utterly sure that it was his special mission to transform Soviet agriculture. In 1935, with the help of philosopher Itzhak Present, Lysenko developed a philosophical system to undergird his biological theories. Lysenko thought of biology as an authentically proletarian discipline, one that should ideally be controlled by the people and shaped by their life experiences. The knowledge of peasants who lived close to the land was to be prioritized over the entrenched bourgeoisie, stained and corrupted as they were by capitalist decadence. Class origin would be enshrined as the central arbiter of scientific truth. Lysenko's position within the Soviet scientific community was now unassailable. And as Stalin ramped up the Great Terror, opposing Lysenko could be the difference between life and death. Lysenkoism remained dominant into the 1940s, although on the ground many Soviet scientists and farmers were quietly abandoning his methods in favor of more reliable ones. After Stalin's death in 1953, Lysenkoism was all but abandoned in the Soviet Union. Stalin himself had grown skeptical of Lysenko towards the end of his life, but the damage was already done. Soviet agriculture and botany had been, in the words of Sam Keane, set back a half century. Lysenkoism was promoted in the Young People's Republic of China. There, it was partially responsible for the grievous famines that devastated the country in the late 50s through the early 60s. It is estimated that between 15 and 55 million people died. Through all the carnage, Lysenko remained obdurate, insisting that his theories were sound and that all of humanity should implement them. He died condemned and anonymous in 1976. His passing received a brief mention in Izvestia, and Soviet authorities waited days to announce his death. I do not believe that Trofim Lysenko was the most evil scientist in history. He was not even the most evil scientist of the 20th century. But he was possibly responsible for more deaths than any scientist in human history. Science is in some sense always political, as it is impossible for any social institution, no matter how neutral it professes itself, to be untouched by ideology. The concerns and objectives of science, especially in the 20th century, were defined by the exigencies of politics. But in Lysenko's case, the bond between science and ideology became virtually indestructible and undifferentiated. This allowed for easy suppression of dissenting voices and the destruction of an open, rancorous space for debate. Science and its practitioners become evil when the essentially adversarial nature of the discipline is abandoned in favor of uniformity. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Who do you think was the most evil scientist in history? Leave your comments and feedback below. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you.